So I'd be interested in learning what community conservation is and how it's different from other ways of doing ecological or environmental work.
My name is Ngamunu Patita. I come from Naritunoi Conservancy, and which is based in the Athi-Kapiti ecosystem, an ecosystem that hosts the Nairobi National Park, the iconic park, the only park that you have within a capital city. So, and I am a programs coordinator working with communities and linking stakeholders and partners to working with communities.
And so what does working with the communities mean? How do you work with them?
Working with communities is basically to analyze the different decision-making structures within communities and how they culturally operate, and then understanding then how to influence change. And when making decisions sort of like in conservation, natural resource use, then understanding what is the role of women in the protection and destruction of the environment, the same thing with them and the same thing with the youth. And all these factors are driven by the responsibilities that each of them have in society. For example, women are the ones who use energy or firewood to prepare meals for their family. So they're in charge of ensuring that there's firewood, there is gas, there is sort of energy for lighting and for cooking. So when you're talking about working with communities, when you're talking about protection of the environment or ecosystems protection, you have then to find out why do women, for example, cut firewood? It's because they need it for making food. So then you have to develop programs, structure programs that ensure that they are able to get energy or source of fire without having to destroy the environment. The men are the providers of their families. So whenever they're not able to probably sell their cattle or any source of income, they'll end up cutting down the trees for charcoal, they'll sell the cows to get a livelihood or make a living for their families. So depending on their responsibility of each, then you develop programs that are suited to meet those needs and to address those needs that they are facing and the challenges that they are facing. So in a nutshell, it is the roles, the responsibilities that each of them have in the society that then brings the discussion and the conversation about conservation. And of course, within the cultural structure, so that you are not developing programs that are not responding to these needs.
Right. And how does climate change affect the Maasai community that you're from here in the Naritunoi, close to Nairobi National Park?
Issues of climate change have been, for a long time, it took a bit of time to understand that it was really a global issue because the effects that we had been facing were just local. And what that means is that it has affected communities in the sense that people have become more impoverished. We've become more vulnerable as a result of having very few income sources, because ideally as communities and people develop, go to school, get an education, get empowered, then you diversify source of livelihood, because then you go to school, you get jobs. But what is happening is that we are becoming more dependent on only our cattle, and our cattle are depending on the land. And on the land is within an ecosystem, and the land is becoming more degraded due to lengthy droughts, subdivision of land that is caused by people wanting a source of income for their families because of other forms of productions failing due to extreme effects of climate change. So adaptation is becoming a challenge in the sense that we have limited capacity to adapt, and also the mitigation measures are limited to livestock production. And knowing what livestock means, in our case, livestock is not insured. Livestock means relying on pastures, and with subdivision of land, we've become more sort of, we do not move anymore, sedentary lifestyle, meaning that whatever amount of land that you have in your family means that all of you are grazing on this same piece of land. The degradation rate becomes really high, and the land does not then you don't give the opportunity to the land to recover, to regenerate. And that is the productivity in terms of invasive species sprouting up due to overgrazing is really becoming high. And having many needs like having to pay for school fees, clothing, food, health needs, and only depending on livestock is making communities poorer and poorer. So climate change has been a major challenge and has pushed communities into poverty. The communities are finding themselves with no other alternative way of adapting to climate change. And for women, this is a matter of, because they're the ones who take care of families. So if, for example, as I said, if the livestock move away in search of pastures, the women are remaining home with their children. Without the men who provide for these families, the women become more vulnerable because of their gender, and because homemakers, and they don't follow the men who trek for kilometers and kilometers, and being left with small children who can't have milk, which is really staple food and a nutrition requirement for children. So women find themselves adjusting to ways of life that they have not been trained to adjust to, and probably even having to migrate and move to urban areas where they could try and find manual jobs to do. So this means that they're moving away from their homes. This means that they're adapting to a culture that they were not trained to adapt. And this is also making them sort of like not able to really invest, because then you're always moving in search of water, pastures, trying to find food for your families, and families are becoming disintegrated because everybody has to go their own way to try and find ways for sustaining their way of life or sustaining themselves. Dropping out of school becomes another factor. So as I say, it is just pushing communities to poverty, and they're becoming more and more vulnerable.
Thank you so much for your time and sharing this with us, Nkamunu Patita. Thank you.
Okay, we are done?